Hey guys, here we are tuning in for what is another episode of the Hard Hit. But this time I'm being joined by none other than Sky Sports Cam Hogwood. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's the morning after the night before with free agency, so like we're just processing. But I'm all good otherwise. It's lots of fun. It's good having kind of football back to kind of get stuck into again. Where we had that kind of bit of a lull, but it kind of hits you hard when it comes back. So yeah, I'm all good other than that.
I mean, they know what to do to keep you interested. We're all sitting there, aren't we? Like, okay, so Super Bowl's done, and everyone's thinking, oh, September. Like, but they do everything they can to obviously keep you entertained. And last night definitely did that. There's been all of the rumblings, you know, I mean, it's in typical fashion, it's always Aaron Rodgers, like always, but we'll come on to that. But now, obviously, we're looking at it now, and the trades and that were potentially going to come up, and the people that are obviously being cut, etc. Do you feel now that the teams are struggling with this with the cap, even though the cap's obviously been increased, obviously for the next coming season? Do you think they really struggled with this?
I don't know if it's a struggle. In fact, I think what we're seeing these days is that we see a deal that will almost change the market, and then it's like a domino effect where I kind of look at Darren Payne in Washington kind of change that defensive tackle market all of a sudden, and Tremaine Edmonds in Buffalo, and obviously him going to the Bears for that kind of mega money. I think it's almost like a domino effect, and I think we see those big deals, and teams are reacting, and like that linebacker market is interesting because I'm a Giants fan, so I'm waiting around for the Giants to sign an inside linebacker, and Tremaine Edmonds goes, and then David Long goes, and you're like, well, who's left? And it's Bobby Okereke, and you're
Mm.
like, oh, so I don't know if it's the cap's always a talking point, but teams can work around a cap these days, and you look at what the Browns just did with Deshaun Watson; they just trimmed $34 million in cap
Yeah.
space by restructuring. So teams are wise to it now. But it's so interesting how one deal impacts the other. And I don't want to throw him straight back into the conversation because Aaron Rodgers loves that kind of thing. But you're now looking at the Jets where they have to get this over the line now because Jimmy G's gone, Derek Carr's gone. You don't know where else they realistically look. Mike White, they gave away Mike White, who for all kind of intents and purposes, did all right when he came and filled
Yeah.
in for Zach Wilson
Yeah.
last year. So that's a situation where that has to happen for them now. Otherwise, you've got another year of Zach Wilson and it's another year gone, basically.
Well, they have to look back at the draft. They have to go back into the draft for QB. Like, I'm a Cardinals fan. I'm looking at it going, if it doesn't get done, that's just another person that needs a QB. So we're like, okay, rubbing our hands together to potentially come down a bit. For people that are obviously still trying to, you know, there's some new fans in this sport, which is great. We've obviously seen the sport sort of grow. So to me, trying to explain this to people, it's like the Neymar transfer. You know, PSG went and bought Neymar big millions of pounds, and it just changed the whole market because all of a sudden Coutinho suddenly got purchased 110 million, and ever since then, prices of you can't get your head around it. And I think now, obviously, we're seeing this. I almost feel like the Mahomes contract when that came out, and everyone was like blown away by the figures, but it was a team friendly deal, really. But people just seen the figures, and like you said, then other positions would be like, hold on, you know, like, how am I? I'm not maybe not to say they're as important as Pat Mahomes, but they're going to be seen as still an integral like piece to the jigsaw. So I think the figures have gone up. The cap space just gets eaten into, even though it gets increased, it's just obviously I don't think it can keep up with the inflation we say in the prices. But it is interesting now because I think there's more talent in the league as well. So money is getting passed around left, right, and centre at this point. But you mentioned the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. Well, let's get this out of the way. It drives me crazy. I have to talk about this guy every time. But are they about to sell their soul for short term success and not even guaranteed success? By the way,
Yeah, it's a really hard one because they went so high on Zach Wilson, and it was so obvious now that it's just I don't want to call him a bust because he's made it to the NFL, but that's effectively what it's become because he's shown that he couldn't transition, couldn't get into the league. Look, he'll sit behind Aaron Rodgers if he comes in, and there's probably no one better to learn from. But Aaron Rodgers, if he goes there, he doesn't want to be teaching some guy that can't play quarterback in the NFL. He just wants to win. And I think they're also in that kind of purgatory situation where they are so close now. That defense last year was top 3, maybe. I think it was top 3 in the end. It was exceptional. Yeah. And look, you look at the offense, and we said before last season, everything Zach Wilson could have wanted and needed was there for him to succeed. And if Aaron Rodgers will look at that and think, I'm 10 times the player Zach Wilson is, look, I'm in a good situation here. So that's the confusing thing with me, is that why hasn't he made the decision already? Because I don't know, there's not another situation in the league besides Green Bay where he could walk in and it's almost set up for him to succeed, because there's everything he could want on that team. There's top class weapons. There's a decent offensive line. That defense is going to, if anything goes wrong, it'll bail him out. But yeah, it's a really hard one for the Jets. And you can only kind of compare it maybe to that. I mean, the Rams are further ahead in the process than the Jets are, but they kind of traded away everything to go and get Matthew Stafford and win that Super Bowl. And now you look where they are, and they're kind of tearing the whole thing down again to rebuild. So yeah, you might be right. It might be a short-term thing, because when you listen to Aaron Rodgers speak, I don't know how much longer he really wants to play. To be honest, he is.
He's done. He's done. Yeah. Cam, he's done. He's done. He's been tuned out for so long, and he knows that no matter what he does, he's getting paid. Whether it's by the Packers or another organization, he's not listening to coaches. He's changing plays at the line of scrimmage every time. It's like he doesn't care about the head coach at the Packers. He says he loves the Packers, but then he doesn't really respect the organization in that respect of like who's on the sideline for me. It's always someone else's fault. He's now sitting there and he's like, he keeps himself relevant with his big friend, his pal Pat, and he'll tell him about his retreats that he's going on. Keeps himself relevant, and people are like, he's still he's a talented QB, but he's checked out. I think you can be talented, but if you're mentally just checked out, ready to go, it's no good. That's why, for me, the difference between him and Brady never checked out. Like, it cost him his like personal life. It cost him, because he was so like switched on the whole time. He will go to the Jets. Will he win games? Yes, he'll win games, but he's not going to help the next man up. We've seen that. He doesn't like number twos. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about helping them and developing them. It's quite obvious that. So even if they bring someone in down the line, is he going to help them? Is he going to just literally just tear the bottom out of it, which I think he actually is going to do. The other thing that concerns me is how they get the best out of Aaron Rodgers. You talk about Zach Wilson, but before that, they thought they had Sam Darnold. Then it's Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Listen, I'm not saying that they're all three are very different in that respect, like in terms of talent, but there's got to be something else to this as well as to why a QB can't be successful in this. We won't talk about Zach Wilson's off the field antics. That's probably like American Pie-esque, but like I think you got to look at it now and go, well, what's happening there? Is this the one to do this? Is that why they're going Aaron Rodgers? Because they're afraid to go and bring in another rookie and for it to fail. But the Jets have got everything they need. It's this one piece. I just don't think this is the right QB to be picking up to sort of pick this up and run with right now.
Yeah, it's funny as well. I was kind of following it on social media like you do last night, and I loved Rasul Douglas's the Packers defensive backs Twitter feed. He was like, guys, message me, I'll give you the details. And then like Aaron Rodgers tweeted him, and I think he's saying like, I'll take your phone off you. And it was just like, I don't know. That kind of exchange told me like, one, there's every chance he still stays, and two, he doesn't really care where he goes. Like either or. It's like an either or situation. It's like, I am where I am now, and I think the one kind of big factor with the Jets would be Nathaniel Hackett's there, which is, I know you love Nathaniel Hackett, which I've always said is probably because he's a bit of a yes guy and he just lets Aaron do what he wants to do on that offense. And with all due respect to Nathaniel Hackett, because he's a really actually clever offensive mind, he's just head coaching not his gig, and it just didn't work out for him. But yeah, the question of the quarterback situation in New York is a really tricky one, because you don't want to attribute Sam Darnold's failure to Adam Gase, but that's probably one of the big situations. That scheme wasn't great, and Sam Darnold had the whole thing with seeing ghosts on the sideline and just wasn't. He kind of hit that blip and it kind of derailed his whole development. And the Zach Wilson one's bizarre because his final year at college comes out of nowhere, plays behind the best offensive line in college football in BYU, has these ridiculous kind of off-platform throws. And if you're judging him off that, it's really risky, because as soon as he steps into the NFL and he talks about trying to learn which throws he can get away with and which he can't, well, he was making the same throws all year, so he wasn't learning at all.
Yeah.
It's just it's a separate situation, because it's a quarterback development in the NFL story, and it's just bizarre to me that to fail so badly and look so out of your comfort zone and to make such bizarre decisions. It is the nature of the NFL, and I find that whole Zach Wilson story just fascinating, how he looked the way he did. And yeah, like you say, the American Pie antics off the field didn't help.
Didn't help one bit. No, that's it. It was very, very strange one there. I mean, sticking with New York, what's your thoughts on Mr. Danny Dimes and this contract? Is he deserving of it? Is it the right amount? Do you see any risk in it? And were you happy for him to sign that deal?
The last question, I was happy for him. I was happy because he'd had such a tough ride, and look, he played well. He played well last year. So definitely down the stretch, we saw a lot from him, and he was in a better team, a better scheme, which obviously suited him better, and got to play to his strengths, which was using his legs. That's what he's great at, and he made good throws once we put a couple of weapons around him. Once Isaiah Hodgins came in, there was a little bit of continuity in terms of what we wanted to do. The whole plan was getting Saquon out in space where we could, and then kind of letting him do his thing. And as soon as you do that, it opens up the rest of the field for the offense, and Darius Slayton starts to have a good season. But I think I was looking at the deal, and I think it is fairly top heavy in terms of, if it doesn't work out after 2 years, it's not going to kill us. And I think that's very important financially, because like you say, with the Mahomes on, you look at that first number, and you're like, well, like that. When you consider that the Ravens don't even want to pay Lamar Jackson, you're like, oh, okay. But one of the good things about it was that it got done before that franchise deadline. Just got out of the way. Like, we're still talking about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and the Jets. They don't know what they're doing. I'm glad that it just got ironed out, signed Danny Dimes, gave Saquon the tag, sorted 2 of your priority bits of business done, get on with the rest of the offseason. Now you know what your cap is, you know what you're dealing with heading into the free agency period. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see this season now, because you don't want it to have been a factor of Brian Daboll's reinvigorate this guy, giving him all the confidence in the world, and it's a run purely built on self-confidence and self-assurance and a bit of continuity around the team. This will be the real test now for Daniel Jones, and I think he'll pass it, because inevitably they'll bring in a new receiver for him, a few more weapons, the team will get stronger. But it's an interesting one, because you always go back to Mitchell Trubisky, whose kind of season in Chicago is very good. It's very similar in terms of so good with his legs out of the pocket. Wasn't exactly prolific through the air, but did enough. And then the next year, it kind of falls down. So that's I don't want to throw Daniel Jones into that entire category, because it'll be unfair. Yeah, this will do his true test. Overall, happy for him, because look, broke that playoff duct, got us back to the playoffs effectively, played really well down the stretch. That Vikings game was one of probably the best game. Yeah. So happy for him. But yeah, it's a tricky one, because you look around the league and you'd love a Justin Herbert or a Patrick Mahomes or a Joe Burrow, and that's the standard. Unfortunately, they've burdened young quarterbacks with such a high standard, so you're always going to compare them to that, and that's unfortunate for Daniel Jones.
That's it. I think what's quite interesting there is actually that proper changing of the guard now. Like, no Mannings, no Brady, Big Ben's obviously out the picture, Philip Rivers, all these like names that you just associate. Like, you didn't even have to, like, every day you tuned in on a Sunday, it was just the same faces, weren't it, for so long. So now obviously we're seeing these QBs obviously coming in, and actually what I'm finding is not a lot of them are actually able to stay in something right now. You mentioned probably the three or four there. Obviously, there's question marks over in Arizona, and for me with Kyler. Like, I like Kyler. This will be a test for him coming back from an injury, and then seeing if it's him, or was it him, or was it Cliff? So be interesting to see if he stays up there. Lamar, why is he not getting paid? But by Baltimore for first place, but why are other people not negotiating? And a lot of people are saying that people don't want to do that, so they don't do all the hard work for the Ravens. So it's like, well, it's not helping him. Who's representing him? Because you got to be doing this in a way that you can get your man paid. And if he doesn't want to be in Baltimore, he's got to be very clear about that, so they can go and get something done. But there's just no chat. There's no whispers of a different team. There's no whispers of him signing a deal at Baltimore. What do you put that down to? Is that did they go too early, like him and his reps, or is he not done enough? How do you see it?
The interesting thing I find about Lamar is he represents himself. He doesn't have an agent. And I think that's possibly why we haven't heard any kind of lingering rumors or about who might be interested, because effectively, I think usually that is down to representation, who will drop Adam Schefter a text, tell you who's interested and who's not. And Adam Schefter will jump the gun and start telling everyone what's happening. But I think it's hard for Lamar not to take this personally, because the Ravens have effectively said, we're not going to pay you yet. We're going to find out how much other people would be willing to pay you to let us know how much we should potentially pay you. And the fact that nobody's come forward to me is incredibly murky when you consider everything. This is a former league MVP who has broken record after record. He's done something we didn't think that the mobile out-of-pocket quarterback could do, in terms of also look very good in the pocket as a passer and develop. I always take it back to, as well, when they traded away Hollywood Brown. You trade away his best friend and you don't tell him that that's happening. That doesn't really help you in a situation. That also swipes away any leg to stand on that you have, in terms of saying we've given you everything. It's just such a win. I can't get my head around how, knowing you get those lists of kind of free agent type players that are available, and Lamar's like at the top, because he's available to talk to teams. That's bizarre to me, because if I'm the Giants, I'm picking up the phone straight away. If you don't sign Daniel Jones, I can't imagine why. When you look at teams like the Colts, why not? Why would you not be looking, especially if now that you think you might have fallen out of that race for the top 3 draft quarterbacks, you're thinking that's 2 first-round picks for Lamar Jackson. It seems like a no-brainer to me. Just, I don't know. What do you think about it? Because it's hard to put down why teams haven't come forward for him. I think
there's question marks. I think there's still question marks. He's had a bad injury. He's had the bad injury. He's come back. He's constantly getting told by Mr. Griffin III, you can't keep doing this. So he has developed in the pocket, but not enough for me, if that makes sense. I don't feel like, yes, he can play in the pocket, but it's still enough. What makes him Lamar Jackson is how he explodes out of that pocket. Who's doing that at the moment? Like, okay, the Chiefs with Mahomes, and he's got sensible with it. New York would have probably allowed him to do that, but they're backing their guy. I'm trying to see the teams that want to do this, giving up that, a 2 first round picks for him with a big class of QBs right now. the Colts, I think will swap maybe with us. I think there might be something, there. Doesn't matter with us. We thanks to the extra pick, we're still going to get our guy at 4.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I probably see that. You know, it's I do feel for him, but this is where when you're representing yourself, as much as you don't want to give someone else that money, and you want to be the voice, you're getting played. It's the simple. You need someone that knows how to play this game. You know, knows all the dirty tricks for you to get paid. That's why we see QBs. This is why we see other players get money, and we're like sitting there, me, you, and the rest of the gang sitting there going, "You what? How did he get that? You know, why is this happening? It's because someone is there representing you that knows how to get the deal done and to create that urgency and that hype. Your game tape is not enough. Your stats are not enough anymore. It doesn't. That's the game. That's why I feel for him. He's going to be at Baltimore where they don't. It doesn't, for me. It doesn't suit him. It has never suited him for me. I don't think at Baltimore, and this is why I think it's time. And like you said, trading his best mate over to Bank. When I woke up and saw that, I was like, "Cheers, thanks." Like, where's that come from? Because it was another thing out of nowhere that we're suddenly getting Hollywood Brown. It's like, hold up, what's happening? So for me, they don't respect him. Move on. Like, but you have to create that hype yourself. If that's the case, because he can't. I know he says he can speak to people, but who's he speaking to? Does he have the right contacts? Does he have that person? So I think he shot himself in the foot a little bit by not having the rep personally, like the representatives to help him. And he's going to find himself, for me, wasting his talent at Baltimore because they're not anywhere near in contention for anything at this point. But for me,
I think that the whole contract situation as well, the part that helped him is that we're all looking at the Ravens and thinking, you've messed up because the Browns have just paid Deshaun Watson $240 million guaranteed. And you're asking yourselves, how could you possibly do that and not pay a league MVP? The injury definitely played a part, I imagine, where that's helped the Ravens because it's thrown that question mark in as, oh, can Lamar stay fit? Which I think he can. Quarterbacks have come back from injuries a lot. I think Todd Monken has come in as the new OC in Baltimore from Georgia. Very smart guy. Talked about in his press conference about using Lamar out of the pocket. He painted the picture of a more Lamar-friendly scheme to the one Greg Roman was running. I think I do feel for Lamar because Rashad Bateman was meant to be a really huge help in terms of that vertical threat off the back end for that Ravens offense. Got injured again. It just didn't work out. It's either he got injured or Lamar got injured. So they haven't had the chance to work together that regularly. Mark Andrews got injured last year, didn't help his cause. I look at that Bengals game right towards the end of the season where Tyler Huntley has the chance to win the game and kind of progress it, keep the Ravens season going. I think if Lamar Jackson's playing that game, given how well that Ravens defense played, how good that Ravens defense is, I think they cruise through that game against an underperforming Bengals team. So I think that injury hasn't helped him in terms of where it's come this season because he bet on himself and it went the worst it probably could have gone in terms of where that injury came in the season. But I just think back, I try and remember the player that we're talking about who's got incredible skill set, something few others in the league can do, he can do. If I'm Baltimore, I bite the bullet and pay him because I don't know where you go otherwise.
Why wouldn't the Jets look at? Why wouldn't the Jets look at over Rodgers? You got Rodgers and you got Lamar Jackson.
Be great, wouldn't it? If they just said, "Aaron, we've changed our mind. We're going to go Lamar instead." But
why? That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, okay, so you got an organization that's prepared to go out and get a QB, outside of the draft. You've got an aging Aaron Rodgers who we don't know if he actually wants to play football or wants to come to you or wants to stay at the pack. We don't. That is big question mark. There's question mark all over the place. Then you got another MVP that just wants to be paid and win games of football. So why? What is there must be something we are not seeing, because there are other teams looking for, I guess the Broncos went early. Obviously they got Wilson in again. They sold their soul for Wilson as well. Albeit, yes, Hackett was in charge at that point, but what? Do you not wait a year again? Did you not wait that year to go out and get them up? To me, there's something being missed, because why is this, like you say, why is this guy not being picked up, and why is he not being paid by the organisation he's at? Like, they're not in a rush to secure him, which is a worry for me, and this is why hopefully I'm sure it will come out as to why it is not being this rush. But the Ravens. Do you see the Ravens make it? I just haven't seen anything from them since they made the big run, obviously. So I've not really. It's been a bit of a steady organisation that's just win, lose, tie, whatever you need to do. It's happy days for them, no matter what they're, for some reason.
Yeah, it's weird. And I mean, looking at free agency last night, the kind of legal tampering period opening, Jimmy G to the Raiders. Why would the Raiders not consider Lamar Jackson? Whether they consider themselves in a position to win now, I don't know. But Lamar in Las Vegas, it sells itself. Like, it's just blockbuster. And you please Devontae Adams, I imagine. Jimmy G is one of the least prolific passers in the league of 20 yards and over. That's where Devontae Adams excels. So you've kind of got two polar opposite kind of players. And Devontae Adams right now is fuming, I imagine, about how this has gone for him. And I do feel for him, because this wasn't how it was meant to go. But I think if Lamar stays in Baltimore, I would expect them to make the playoffs, because I think they'll strengthen again. They're unfortunate in that conference where the AFC is so quarterback heavy. It's ridiculous. Like, there's so many good quarterbacks in that league now, where the NFC have kind of fallen behind a little bit. And I think if the Ravens want to challenge this season, you have to keep him. You have to, because that's where you fell short eventually last year. But I'm with you. I think something's going to come out about this. And I don't know what it is, but for teams not to be throwing themselves at Lamar. And it could be the draft that's kind of made teams think we can get a cheap guy on a rookie deal, a very good quarterback class. But I do think if the Colts one is the interesting one for me, because I think he'd fit into that scheme perfectly, with kind of that Shane Steichen RPO scheme.
Yeah.
It's just where they go in the draft. If they manage to get back to 3, maybe they take Richardson, and you've kind of filled that void with a guy that can fit that scheme.
And it's cheap.
It's cheap. You don't have to pay him. You can pass off for 5 years, and it's bizarre. It is bizarre.
You spoke about Las Vegas. Obviously, Las Vegas about to the next host to the Super Bowl. The Raiders, Derek Carr gets his mate out to the desert. Widely disrespected, I'd say, Derek Carr whilst in Las Vegas. For me, I still think he's a good QB. They were let down hugely by their defense a lot of the time, actually, when I look back at it. I mean, even when as the Cardinals, we went there and I was watching that. I'm watching that game. Jesus, okay, we just got to make this respectable. And then the way it came back to us, it was great. Obviously, yeah, the defense we picked up. Derek Carr did throw an interception at that point, but I just feel like he wasn't back. So he was never going to be full of confidence to play. Like, there was always you could always feel like there was a dark cloud by him, just waiting to sort of strike him down every time. But you bring in Jimmy G, it just doesn't make sense as a replacement for Derek Carr. Like, Jimmy G there, that everyone that was potentially available. Jimmy G. The guy's not healthy. Well, I can't think of the last time. That's the reason he's a backup. He's an expensive backup normally, because he will, 6 or 7 games whilst you're waiting for your number one to come back. It's great. You're reliant that you got Jimmy G. We just saw what happened in San Fran, and he's been doing that every time. Like he comes in injured, Patriot comes in. Even when Brady needs that, he had a break or whatever. But he's injured after 2-3 games. Thank God Brady's back. That's how it was. Like every time, and then like you say, his production is not that great. It was just a very good steady Eddie. Is he a start? Is he a starting QB in the NFL for you? Realistically, is he the man that you're going to build your team around at this point?
He's not a guy I'm building my team around. Is he a starter this season? When you look at the landscape, somehow you'd say yeah, because the Raiders are an interesting one, and maybe this still tells us about how they feel they are and what position they think they're in this season, which probably isn't one to compete. But I think the Josh McDaniels factor is huge because you'll have worked with him, he'll have known him, you'll know he can at least get by a little bit. But I'm just disappointed because we talked about this Raiders team and the fireworks of Las Vegas and Devontae Adams coming in, and for it to have fizzled out this quickly is really disappointing, especially for kind of fans of Raiders. And they've got some really good players sporadically across that roster. Max Crosby is an exceptional pass rusher, and he's left on his own a little bit. That secondary is not bad. It's kind of Devon Diablo is a good player, and he can kind of hold his own back there. And then Trayvon Moehrig as well is a really smart safety. Josh Jacobs, they brought him back, kind of led the league in rushing yards last year. So there is talent on the team, but is Jimmy G going to ignite that team and make them believe they can do something this year in that division? Not a chance. They don't stand a chance in that division. Looking at paper,
they need. For me, I think there's some off the field things that they need to address. You're in Las Vegas. They lost Henry Ruggs, for the DUI, and he's still going through that as well. Young lady obviously losing her life because of it. Rookies going into that place, they need a support system so they can just think football. Like that's it. Vets coming into that team, like yes, they're vets, but like you said, there's a few shining lights in and around that place. You need to think just football. You got a stadium that has a nightclub in it where, we're seeing former players watching games with bottles of, I'll say alcohol because there's plenty of brands that you can get, but you obviously plenty of bottles. And it's like, is this just a party? Is this now turning into a bit of a party organization where people aren't maybe taking it as seriously as it needs to be? Like it's that glitz and glam. We watched the Browns try and create that sort of NBA style team, right? And it didn't work. I almost felt like the Raiders were trying to do something very similar and it hasn't worked. Do they need to peel it back a little bit and just bring in sort of more functional players at this point to build on?
It's almost like that picture where it's like the really rundown house with like the Lamborghini parked outside, like the flip where like the house is amazing and you're driving like a Picasso or something.
Yeah.
No disrespect to Picasso drivers, but it's like you've got this incredible setup, and I think it always, the expectations always needed to be tempered because it wasn't a team in the first place. It was competing, I don't think, once it got to Las Vegas. But the Derek Carr situation, I think, has really muddied the whole situation because you've disrespected a guy that has been, even though he didn't achieve massive things with this team, he's really highly respected by this fan base and this organization. And you've kind of left him out to dry. Didn't even include him in the final games of the season, went for Jarrett Stidham, which is disrespect at its highest for a guy like that. And I think that's really posed some question marks about the way this organization is run. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier, you bring Devontae Adams in, you almost sell him this dream of you're going to play with your college teammate again. We're going to run this thing down to the ground and put everything into this and really compete. And all of a sudden, one season down, the dream's over. So it's really interesting. they're lucky that Las Vegas is a sell. Players will want to play there, but it is about making sure that you do bring it back to the football. And this is a business. You have to win to be able to justify being in this enormous stadium in this incredible city. And give people a product to come and watch, because even the brand of football was just not exciting. And you wonder, I think Josh McDaniels enters the season one of the most under pressure head coaches.
I don't see him getting through the season. If I'm honest, I just don't see it. I feel he was under. I don't know how he survived last season. If I'm honest, I don't like seeing coaches when they lose their jobs. It's a highly pressured role. It's a job that will give you the grey hairs or lose your hair. Put it that way. But at the same time, you got to be true to yourself, and if you're not getting the job done, next man up. And that is unfortunately the harsh realities of the business. And like you said, it's an amazing stadium. The infrastructure is there to build an absolute ginormous sort of organisation, and really spill out into that division. But obviously they can't get the job done, and it's interesting because I heard I think it was Danny Rose, ex-Spurs player. I think he was on. Funny enough, I think he was on Sky saying you got this amazing house, but the furniture's trash. It's I was like, the Raiders turning into being Spursy? They've got all this stuff. It's a name that people recognise, but just can't get the job done. And it almost there to compare them a little bit. I couldn't tell if the Chargers or the Raiders are Tottenham Hotspur, but that's kind of how I see it. But the Raiders, a long way to go, I think. I'll be intrigued to see if Devontae Adams actually stays there, mate. I'm not, he might stay through a part of this season, but you can't have a talent like that and not win things. It's kind of how I see it with D-Hop as well. At the time of D-Hop coming and join us, we had an organisation that was, JJ Watt is there. We started to bring in a few pieces. There's a bit of excitement. Kyler was obviously in a way kind of unknown in a sense, because he was still producing new things. And then it's obviously it's not worked out. D-Hop wants to move. I'd like to see D-Hop go to a team that is ready to challenge. I don't want him to just go to another team just to get paid. His contract's fine. He can get paid here. I see the same with Devontae Adams. Why waste that? I think that a bit of his talent was wasted at the Packers in a way for the last little bit, because it was on a downward trajectory. Yes, we kind of understood the Las Vegas sort of element, but now do you want to keep that talent in there? That just tied Josh Jacobs down. He don't turn into a prison sentence over in Las Vegas. I feel they need to look at that as well. Maybe use those pieces that they can get from maybe moving someone like that on to build. I look at the models. I'm going back to the Super Bowl now. I'm looking at the two teams that made the Super Bowl. Defense of Philadelphia Eagles, all drafted. The Chiefs offense, 10 of the 11 drafted. Why? What do you then put that success down to? Do you put it down to GM and scouting, or do you put it down to being able to bring certain players in the scheme where we're going back to sort of that long stretch of success at the Patriots, where it worked. It didn't need a flashy name, it just needed someone to be able to work in that particular scheme. What do you put that down to?
I think different for different situations. I think the Chiefs and the Eagles, I think a lot of it is exceptional coaching, putting players in a position to thrive. I think in the Eagles' perspective, maybe patience as well. You're letting your draft picks develop, where in a league where it's so cutthroat, it's very easy to give up on people and not to coach them and develop them. I think that's what the Eagles have done so well in order to keep this kind of defense together, where you've got so many familiar faces that have been there together for years, which is another factor in terms of continuity, working together. We're unfortunately seeing the Eagles lose a couple of players now, because in the end, something has to give. Some money talks. Someone has to always get the chop, unfortunately, or be passed on to bring funds in. But I do think it is that college football is thrown up as good a depth of talent, I think, as it probably ever has. When you look at the amount of good picks you get in later rounds these days that can give you good production and over time can come together and do good things for you, I think that's a factor. Whereas in the past, maybe it was a little bit top heavy college talent coming to the draft. And look, you still get the first round busts where everyone's in on a player and it just doesn't work out. Situation's another big thing, which is perhaps why those later round picks work out so well, because they land in more kind of comfortable situations with teams that are ready to compete. But I think looking at the Chiefs, I'll always put down to Andy Reid, because I think he's just an absolute football geek and just knows how to get the best out of people, and it's really brilliant to see. And that's the other big thing when you have a guy like Mahomes as well, is you can put anyone around him and he's a creator, he'll create things, and as long as that offensive line's shored up, you're in business once he's there. But it is an interesting one, I think. I do look at the Raiders. I looked at a mock draft actually yesterday, and someone had the Raiders going for Will Levis, the Kentucky quarterback, at 7, which is interesting because he's the big arm of the guys, of the top 4, you'd say. Would Devontae Adams like to play with someone like that in a year's time? Maybe. Is he going to wait a year to play for a guy like that? Who anyone who comes in is sitting behind Jimmy G, I imagine, at this point. But yeah, it's the Raiders. You have to decide where you are. The Rams are at a point now where they're like, oh, can we have some draft picks back? Like, we didn't care about them last year. Now we'd like them back, please. Can we have some draft picks? So I think, look, maybe that's the way we're going, where draft picks lost their value for a few years. Maybe we're heading back to that way now because of the standard of talent coming out. It's interesting for you as well, because you hold so much power in that draft. It's ridiculous. Like, you could go either way, and I think people should remember how lucky you are to have Kyler, because he does things no other quarterback in the league could do at times. Yeah. And so you're almost that kind of free pick is almost a luxury pick in a way.
Yeah, I've said this on a couple of other pods recently, where I just sort of said to people, look, okay, we're sitting there at 3. Everyone wants there's a lot of people that want a QB, a lot of people that don't want the position we need, but you don't want to fall out too much. But it's like, okay, if we can stay in that top 10, there's still that chance to get Jalen Carter. There's still that chance to get Will Anderson anyway. But so you're going to get the pick you potentially want out of it. Another first round pick for next year, probably some other sort of pick along for this season as well. If we do move D-Hop on, people are after that talent as well. You can still get a couple of second round picks they're talking about as well. Use that. Use that at this point. There's wide receivers. There's wide receivers available, because nothing really happened yesterday. So, we've got to look at that and go, actually, yeah, look, day 2, can we do that pick? Can we do that? Can we secure something now before letting D-Hop go? You let D-Hop go, people know, right, you need a wide receiver. Can we do that? And get that sorted out. Yes, we do have a lot of power in that, in that draft, and I think that's where we've got to use that quite smartly when it comes down to it. But for me, the team, and I've been saying it before, any move was made just because of what was on paper. The Chicago Bears, for me, are the team to watch. They are able to splash the cash with no problem at all, no hits. They've obviously made that choice with the first round pick. Absolute delightful for them, because they've ended up with so much more sort of collateral there to use. And it didn't matter. Managed to catch up briefly with Chase Claypool at the NFL flag event that they've put on with the Jets, funny enough. And just saying to him, generally, the question that you can ask all the time, how excited should your fans be? I was like, generally, I need to ask, because right now, this is an exciting time. You're potentially going to lose Rodgers as well out of the Packers, so he can relinquish his ownership of the Bears, as he self-states, and they can have a real go at it. They can really, really go at it. They've already got a few weapons in there. They're able to add. Do you see them being? I don't want to call them dark horse because I feel like they're going to be able to add, but where they've been so distant from it this year, are they the team to watch? Do you see anyone else as sort of that one to keep an eye on?
I don't expect the Bears to compete. I expect them to be dangerous because if they sort out that offensive line, like you say, Justin Fields is looking at a kind of receiver group of Chase Claypool, DJ Moore now, who came in as part of that trade, who is exceptional, by the way. Like, what a part of that
That's
trade.
insane.
That's probably my favourite part. And then Darnell Mooney, who was effectively their number one last year, it's almost a battle to be that number one receiver. You've got three guys that could probably play that role to an extent. The number two is going to be just as good, basically. I think where they traded back to 9, that probably put him in position for probably the top offensive tackle, I'd imagine. Depends how the rest of the draft falls, obviously. But yeah, Tremaine Edmonds coming in. I mean, it's a little bit bizarre. They didn't pay Robert Quinn and now they've paid Tremaine Edmonds a ton of money, but defense still needs some pieces. The safeties are good. They've got a really good safety group and a defensive back group. So yeah, I mean, we're with Matt Eberflus as well. He's that defensive guy, so he can sort that out for them.
Do that. Yeah.
They are interesting. It's just what kind of Justin Fields will we see? How much of that running will we see again? Because do you want to do that full time? Is that sustainable? We're about to find that out this year. You bring in 3 pass catching guys who are going to want a lot of the ball. You can't run it with Justin Fields every single game because one, you probably have to pay him eventually. Do you want to run him into the ground and kind of punish him that way where he's having to run it every single play? But they are interesting. I'm trying to look around.
The thing is that money that they've got left. The likes of like a Kareem Hunt potentially being available. He's putting it. That's where you start to save his legs a little bit. There are some running backs that obviously are available as well that will be able to do that. But yeah, I still got them. I mean, can you see? Yeah, I mean, if you had a chance to look, because I'm just trying to. The Jets. You've got to look at the Jets. You do have to look at the Jets.
If Rodgers comes in, the Jets for sure will be up there. I think the Lions. The Lions are an interesting one. It depends. Look, I think Jared Goff comes back and starts again. They might spring a surprise and do something in the draft. I don't think they will. I think they'll probably wait till next year when the class is pretty good again. But Jameson Williams coming back into the offense, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you look around and Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, he is a bit of a mastermind who just loves throwing up these kind of quirky plays. I think they will challenge. And like you say, with Rodgers out of the picture, potentially that is something to keep an eye on this year. Yeah, the Jets, the Lions, I'm trying to think around. The Falcons, depending on what they do, it's just how it depends on what they do.
Notorious choke. I don't know what it is there. They just choke every time. It doesn't matter. I don't know what it is. It's like a mentality. There's something within that organisation that just can't get the job done. I just can't see it.
I mean, I don't even know why I threw the Falcons in there because I was just thinking about their team and I'm like, nah. That's because I spoke to Desmond Ridder before he got drafted and he's a really lovely guy and he's really smart, but there's a lot of pressure on his shoulders. Like I remember draft night when they interviewed him, he's like, I'm going to bring us a Super Bowl. I was like,
no.
Don't say it.
Yeah.
He's actually a really good player. One of the most winningest quarterbacks in college football history, actually, ever out of Cincinnati. But what can he do with the Johnny Smith trade is weird. Where does that leave Kyle Pitts? What are you trying to do there with that 12 personnel group? Drake London is a really good player. But again, you've got 3 similar guys, vertical threats. Cordell Patterson, how much longer can he keep that going? The Falcons are a weird one. I don't know. I don't know what to expect from them. They could be anything.
What about the Jags? London's team, as they call it, because there was a bit of form there last year. Trevor Lawrence is starting to find his feet and a bit of confidence there. There's still questions around his leadership a little bit. Like seems to be quite quiet, quite reserved. From what we see. Do you see them adding what they need to really sort of compete? Because let's say the form came in at the right time for them. So do you think they can build on that?
I do, yeah. I think the Jags will be here to stay for a few years now. Touch wood, because like I love Trevor Lawrence. I really want him to see him do well because